Project Hail Mary. Proof that no matter how bad your Monday is, it could always start by waking up alone in space and having no idea why. G'day BookTube. You're here with Nick, the Renaissance Bookman, and today I am reviewing Andy Weir's best novel yet, Project Hail Mary. Andy Weir, he's done it again. He's been able to bring together this functional blend of gripping storytelling with really high stakes, with good enough, believable enough scientific theory. More on that later. I'm probably underselling that a little bit. And tells his story through this really likable, charismatic, witty protagonist that you can't help but root for. The mixture of all of that creates an absolute banger of a novel. It is terrific, and one that I could not recommend highly enough. When thinking about how I wanted to describe Project Hail Mary, I was reminded of something that Dan Carlin said. Dan Carlin is one of my favorite podcasters. He's responsible for the Hardcore Histories podcast. And in that, he's done a series on the Japanese. It's called Supernova in the East. And when describing the Japanese, he describes them as whatever you're thinking about, but even more so. If you're thinking about X and the way that they were able to mobilize their middle class, yeah, well, the Japanese were like that, but even more so. If you're thinking about people group Y and how patriotic they were, yeah, well, the Japanese were that, but even more so. And that's the best way I've got to describe Project Hail Mary. If you liked The Martian and everything it had to offer, yeah, well, Project Hail Mary is that, but even more so. If you thought the science in The Martian was cool, the character depth, the stakes, even more so when it comes to Project Hail Mary. And so we join Project Hail Mary just as Ryland Grace, our witty, charismatic protagonist, he wakes up in the middle of space from a coma with no idea how it is that he got there. And then from here, the story then takes this 50-50 split between present tense and past, where in the present day, we're solving problems with Ryland. We're trying to figure out what's going on, why it's happening, and solve these problems as we're discovering them. But then we get to learn about the why behind so many things. Then we get to discover more of Ryland's backstory as he remembers them in these flashbacks. And that's a really cool aspect of this book, is that we're discovering what's going on with Ryland at the exact same time that he is. And so that creates a really interesting dynamic. There's a bunch of times where Ryland has these half thoughts, half memories, this muscle memory almost, where he's like, why do I know this? How does this happen? What's going on with that? The answer hasn't yet been revealed. And so it gives us an opportunity for us to extrapolate, for us to think about it, for the nerds amongst us to actually try and apply and solve the situation ourselves based on our my limited knowledge of all things science. And then in a couple of chapters' time, we get the reveal and we get to discover it at the same time as Ryland. So this is a really cool aspect of the story, this problem and then discovery reveal process is really well done. Andy Weir has done a terrific job with this aspect of the book. And in particular, it's not almost the scientific aspects that are the most impactful, it's the character development. Ryland Grace is discovering who he is and what his motives are at the same time that we are. So we're seeing his current day actions, and then we get to contrast that to who he was before he stepped on the spaceship. And that's a really cool piece. And this is the thing that I think separates this book from The Martian. The stakes are also higher. I don't need to say much about that. If you ever want to level up a book, yeah, just increase the stakes and you're probably going to get a good result. Now, I'm not going to say much more on why Grace is there, what he's trying to achieve and who and what he discovers on the way, because that's for you to figure out. If I was to tell you that now, I'd be spoiling that whole reveal process that you get to go through with the main protagonist as well, or with the protagonist, Nicholas, tautology. There is also another way that you could ruin a whole bunch of the reveals, and that's if you were to go and watch the movie trailer that's currently sitting out there. We've all seen it, and the YouTube algorithm knows us too well. Ryan Gosling is going to be playing Ryland Grace in the movie, which I think is coming out in April of next year, April of 2026. I'm definitely going to watch it. But in that trailer, they give away a huge aspect of the book. One of these amazing discoveries that you get to go through, and that's really disappointing. Fortunately, I'm a YouTube fiend. And so, Smitty, thank you very much. Phil, appreciate you. You guys gave me the heads up, the fact that this trailer was a huge spoiler. So I demonstrated a little bit of self-restraint and didn't watch it despite the YouTube algorithm demanding that I have to scroll past it 15 times before I can find anything else. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for not tainting my reading, keeping my reading pure. Thank you very much for that. And so I'm also going to try my hardest not to reveal any spoilers, which is hard when you're doing a book review on something that you're discovering new things the entire time as you're reading it. One of my favorite things is to look at the morally ambiguous decisions that people make, the themes that are explored, and try and relate those to my life and the decisions that I have to make. So what can I learn? Do I have to make the same mistake, or can I learn like vicariously through the mistake that you made and prevent me from having to do the exact same thing? But that is hard. No, I can't say that. That'll give it away. Like, here's an example of something that I like to explore. At what stage is it okay, because the stakes are high enough, to take someone's agency away from them, to prevent them from being a participant in the decision-making process? That's something that I thought about a bit when reading this book. So the reason why this idea plagued me as much as it did is one of the more pivotal moments in my life was actually very similar. Now, obviously not on the same scale as we might see in Project Hail Mary, but influential in my life nonetheless. So back when I was going through my first initial training, the way that the schoolhouse worked is the better you did on course, the more likely you were to get your preferences in terms of location to go and work. But it became quite clear towards the end of course that my decision in terms of where I wanted to get posted was going to have a cascading effects to the other members on my course. But what are the highest priorities for a 21 or 22-year-old? Yeah, women, right? And so I was about to choose a location that was close to where my then girlfriend was living. Hey, that all makes sense. That's quite normal. However, that location was probably the worst location I could have selected for my career progression and for the consolidation of my skills. All the instructors knew this. The chief instructor, the head of the schoolhouse, came and saw me and he's like, "Hey, Nick, I understand you're thinking about making this decision. We've had a chat and we've decided that we're not going to let you. We've taken that option away from you. And in fact, we want to send you here." And what was really interesting is where they had selected that they wanted to send me was almost as far away in Australia that you could get from where my girlfriend was. 21 and 22-year-olds are not good at long distance relationships. That was almost like a nail in the coffin, right, for that relationship. Now, in the end, I compromised a little bit and I ended up selecting a location that was a few extra 100 kilometers up the road to where I was originally thinking. I'm thinking that was a happy medium between career progression and co-location with my girlfriend. So that was fascinating to have that option taken away from me. And you can see elements of it in that book as well. In the end, all ended up okay. I got to the new location and my girlfriend broke up with me about 3 months later. Bummer, but that's okay. I ended up loving the job that I had there. And I ended up meeting my now wife over the back fence. I married the girl next door. So thank you, chief instructor, for taking away options from me. In the end, it ended up okay. Something else that I like to do is to pull apart a bunch of the quotes. Now, that again is very difficult for the aforementioned reasons, but there is one we can explore, I think. And I've bookmarked it here. And so this is a statement, if you will, a quote that I'm pulling straight from the book. This is Andy Weir's words, not my own, so don't demonetize me. Not that I'm monetized at all. And I realize I'm wearing a hat, and so me looking down probably just casts my entire face in shade. So let's read like a pompous idiot up like this. "Intelligence evolves to give us an advantage over the other animals on our planet. But evolution is lazy. Once a problem is solved, the trait stops evolving." And then a little bit lower down, it says, quote, "We are as smart as evolution made us. So we're the minimum intelligence needed to ensure we can dominate our planets." And I liked that. I've spent a bunch of time sort of looking at the different people groups around the world and trying to justify why different groups evolve at different times. Now, there's a lot of really obvious answers, and I'm probably simplifying it, but geography has a huge part in it. Weather patterns, your ability to make use of your land, the minerals and resources that are available. All of these things play a huge part. Access to trade routes, fresh water. Yeah, okay, I get it. But there are still a whole bunch of societies around the world that despite having very similar access to a whole bunch of those natural resources, have not developed at the same rate as others. Why? I've got a couple of books that have tried to explore that. The book that made your world, now this is a heavily biased look at it, but they posit that the Christian faith and religion is what allowed certain groups to mature, if you will, at different rates to others. I think that's oversimplifying it. In fact, it absolutely is. But it's something I've thought about nonetheless. I discovered that there are at least 3 people at my work that have also read this book. And the way in which I discovered that is quite entertaining. It was a Friday, 2 days after I had finished reading the book. And there's a couple that I work with, and they were having an early knock on Friday to go away for a long weekend. And so they had left. And about an hour later, I'm sitting in the crew room having lunch. There's a bunch of people around. We kind of do this communal lunch thing on a Friday as well. And then this couple walked back in, like I said, like an hour after they were already meant to be on the road starting their holiday. And I just looked up and looked at them and was like, "Oh, you came back?" Question. And immediately there's like 3 little meerkat heads popped up around the room, and they all looked at me and they were like, have you read Project Hail Mary? And there was a whole bunch of jazz hands and amaze to sort of go from there. But that was really quite cool because we were able to nerd out a little bit on this book. We were able to talk about the aspects of the science that we really enjoyed, things that we found challenging, the scenes in which they were just absolutely depressing and really quite a sad and emotive scene. And then others where they were really emotive, but for the opposite reason, where you were almost, if I wasn't a robot, could have considered shedding a tear of joy because of what was occurring. So that was actually really cool to find that with a group of people at my work. I didn't know I had some science fiction lovers that I worked with. So that was really cool. If you think that type of conversation would be really attractive, well, you're not going to get that from me here, because I don't want to be the person that ruins this book for a whole bunch of other people if they stumble across it and are silly enough to be still listening at this point in time. So you'll have to read the book yourself. You'll have to find a group of friends who have also read the book, and then you guys can come together and talk about it. I think we just discovered something. You should do this regularly. Call it a book club, if you will. So unfortunately, you're not going to get that from me. You got to go find that in person. But as I've sort of alluded to a few times, there's a whole bunch of science in there, and most of it goes over my head. And a whole bunch, I was super happy and just smacking the I believe button and then continuing on with the story. But I know a bit about nothing, really. And there was moments where I'm like, does this violate the second law of thermodynamics? I think we do. I think we violate the second law of thermodynamics. The first law might even be in question. I feel like we've got this, I'll say the word substance, hopefully that's not giving too much away, that absorbs heat like it's going out of fashion, but there seems to be no cold aspect of this that we're dispersing to. It's been a hot minute since I've done thermodynamics. We're talking 17 years. But I'm not sure. Maybe my simple brain just hasn't computed what Andy Weir was talking about. But conservation of energy as well, I feel like that could have been an iffy subject. I don't know. If there's any Clausus fans out there that know far more about this, let me know if you think the substance that I'm referring to, try not to give away spoilers, in fact violates the second law of thermodynamics. We'll see. In the end, I was happy to hit the I believe button and continue because the energy aspect of that was really quite fascinating. Loved that. Another one though as well, this one was harder for me to go past. I'm not sure why I did the Trump thing then. That was a bit weird with my hands. So 29 atmospheres. I'm not giving away to anything here. 29 atmospheres. So that's the equivalent of 290 meters below sea level. Now, at the 200 meters below mean sea levels, where the twilight zone of the sea starts. Now, I appreciate there's no photosynthesis below that level, but it's the twilight zone. We haven't got anglerfish getting around here at 290 meters. We're getting closer to 1,000 before we get to that type of territory. And there is light penetrating through. I'm not convinced we would be in complete darkness. But if that is too much of a small point for you, if I'm splitting hairs here, just hit the I believe button and continue on. It wasn't enough. Those little discrepancies, and I'm not even convinced they're discrepancies. My small brain is not that of Andy Weir and the scientists that he obviously had on his team to proofread this. It didn't ruin the story for me at all. It was a thoroughly enjoyable book. The discoveries that you were going to get through the science aspects is awesome. The discoveries you're getting through the character depth, the character development were amazing. And you would be a fool to listen to those two small little gripes that I had and decide that you didn't want to read it or we're going to get hung up on those points as well. Just let my pea brain get hung up on those points and we'll continue on. So that's about all I'm going to say on this, because I have already probably given too much away in reading little things, calling it soliloquies, talking about substances absorbing heat and all sorts of stuff. This is a really good book. It's super easy to read because it's conversational. We're only 480 pages, 500 pages worth of a book. The wit is really enjoyable. The humor throughout, despite really high stakes, is really enjoyable. So if you liked The Martian, this is even better. This is The Martian, but even more so. Let me know in the comments, did you get hung up on the science or were you happy to hit the I believe button? Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is a solid 4.5 arbitrary pineapples. One of the better books that I've read this year, but I've had a terrific reading year. You'll have to wait for my end of year wrap up to figure out where it ranks. This is a terrific book. You should read it. Until next time, ciao.